I see that there's even somebody from Norway watching. Welcome to the Bay Area. It is draft day. I always think about the movie when I say draft day. Kevin Costner actually went to my high school, Mount Whitney in Visalia, about 3.5, 4 hours from here. I'll be down in Santa Clara at 49ers headquarters in just a few hours. Get to talk to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan as they make decisions from the war room. I'm going to have to check in on people, see if you're nervous. I know that this means a lot to the 49ers. This means a lot to their fans. So what better spot to do this from on the morning of the draft than by the Golden Gate Bridge? I always anticipate curveballs during the NFL draft. It is, I don't have to have a source to tell you that there will be curveballs tonight because that is the nature of the draft. You expect the unexpected. It is just like a football game. So these people who try to make 10 mock drafts crack me up because it's like predicting exactly what play the 49ers will run 25 plays into a game. You don't know what the down and distance 25 plays is going to be. You don't know if it's going to be 2nd and 4, 3rd down and 3, 3rd and 12, 4th and 1. You're going to have to think on your feet if you're the 49ers, if you're any team in this NFL draft. And the one piece of intel this morning that is most interesting regarding the 49ers' plans is that Jackson Dart, the quarterback out of Ole Miss, he seems more and more likely to go to the New Orleans Saints at number 9. The Saints, of course, are dealing with the Derek Carr injury. If Derek Carr is unable to play in 2025, they're probably going to need a quarterback, which means that they might be likely to draft a quarterback. And Jackson Dart hadn't previously been expected to sneak into the top 10 ahead of the 49ers at number 11. But the odds this morning are rising of him being picked at number 9 to the New Orleans Saints. They're up to plus 500. It was over plus 1,000 before today. Vegas odds are based, of course, on the flow of money, but the flow of money is based on information. And I can tell you that on this morning 4 years ago, before the 49ers picked at number 3, the odds for the 49ers picking Trey Lance grew precipitously. Some information started to make its way to that betting market, and Trey Lance on this morning 4 years ago became the betting favorite to go to the 49ers. Mac Jones had been the betting favorite because the public had been fooled, but by the morning of the draft, Trey Lance was the favorite. So all of a sudden we see this surge for the Saints and Jackson Dart, and that can really help the 49ers because they're obviously not looking for a quarterback early on in this draft. So the more teams that take QBs ahead of the 49ers, the more really good blue chip players should be available for the 49ers at number 11. So it's just a numbers game at that point, right? If the Saints take somebody who's not a blue chip player whom the 49ers are interested in, there's a much better chance that blue chip player is available for San Francisco. John Lynch the other day, and we always take what he says at the pre-draft press conference with a grain of salt, and he pointed in a bunch of different directions. I think the point is to obfuscate your plans as much as possible. I think all teams are doing that. Didn't the Giants GM's son post QB highlight pictures the other day? I mean, I look at all of this, and people will always point, oh, there's a slip up. A team is broadcasting its intentions. I think that oftentimes teams intentionally broadcast false intentions in order to create a smokescreen. I once had a journalism teacher who said, whenever you see smoke, there's either fire or there's a professional smoke making machine. And I think the draft is a lot of professional smoke making machines. And I get it, it makes it mysterious, it makes it fun, but I think we finally need the pick to get here, or the picks to get here. One thing that Daniel Jeremiah said, and Jeremiah is the guy who mocked Gray Zabel, the center out of North Dakota State. So speaking about Trey Lance, talk about the Bison, his alma mater. He's not technically a center yet. He had only played center at the Senior Bowl, but the interior offensive lineman out of North Dakota State, Daniel Jeremiah in his mock draft has Zabel going to the 49ers, which I think would be a big surprise to a lot of people because they've been talking either defensive lineman or offensive tackle up until this point. So, if that happens, if Gray Zabel goes to San Francisco, I think that it would buck the traditional assumptions about positional value in that seem to be applying to this draft from the outside world. So a lot of people are saying, okay, well, you've got to go edge rusher in the first round because that's where you get the positional value, or offensive tackle, right? Edge and offensive tackle are the two most valuable positions that are worthy of those first round picks. But Daniel Jeremiah, who mocked Gray Zabel to the 49ers, also pointed out that based on all the teams that he's talking to, positional value is not going to be as big of a pick determinant this season than it usually is, because of the fact that this is not a particularly top-heavy draft. That first round, especially once you leave the top 8, the top 9, is considered to be relatively weak. However, there still are starting caliber players, at least according to John Lynch, moving into day 3. So this draft is more meaty in the middle and then extending toward the back end than it is top heavy. And because of that, teams in the first round, where they don't necessarily have 32 first round grades, teams in the first round are going to be much more willing to pick according to specific need instead of being obsessed with positional value. So the Gray Zabel projection from Daniel Jeremiah to the 49ers would reflect that mentality. That would be the 49ers saying, hey, we need another interior offensive lineman. Aaron Banks left in free agency to the Green Bay Packers. The center position for San Francisco needs a long-term solution. Perhaps Gray Zabel can do that because he performed well at the Senior Bowl, and they would buck traditional thoughts about positional value, offensive tackle or edge rusher or even defensive tackle with that number 11 pick and go for an interior offensive lineman. When we spoke to Lynch the other day, he said that best player available is the 49ers' strategy in round 1. He said that you can't go best player available strictly throughout the whole draft. You would always want to obviously take a guy who's very talented, but you have to think about fit, especially in the later rounds when you're really trying to make a prospect work within the context of your roster. But typically, Lynch said in the first round, players are so good that you can't go wrong adding an excellent talent. And in this league, stuff moves so quickly, right? I mean, the average career length in the NFL is only like 2 or 3 years. Superstars don't come along all too often, and the superstars are the guys that play a decade or more in the NFL. You're constantly having to reshuffle the roster in the NFL outside of your star core, and that means at every position. There's no position that just stays fixed as far as the whole group goes for a long period of time, which is why in the first round, if you constantly pick the best player, you're going to be able to find a spot for him, because there's no NFL team that just stays rigid for year over year over year. That being said, even if the 49ers go strictly best player available and they don't think about anything else, there's a really good chance that the best player available in that first round is going to be a defensive lineman, which would also coincide with one of the needs that they have. Throwing another wrench into things is the fact that 49ers themselves have acknowledged that offensive tackle, where I think for the sake of long-term health of this offensive line, they do need to add offensive tackle. They've got such specific requirements for that position that sometimes it's borderline impossible to find a tackle who's going to fit your system beyond the top 10 picks, or who knows, maybe even the top 5 picks. So if a guy that you really like at tackle is available or within striking distance at number 11, then the 49ers may go ahead and take him. Kelvin Banks Jr. is a player who's risen, I think, on a lot of people's draft boards, outsiders mock drafts recently. Really polished tackle out of Texas. The 49ers could be in love with him. I know Kyle Shanahan has a really good relationship with Texas's coach, Steve Sarkisian. I know that Texas had a lot of good players. I mean, that was a team that was so decorated. And whereas everybody was talking about Armand Membu and Will Campbell as the top 2 tackles in the draft for most of the process, there is a chance that Kelvin Banks Jr. ends up usurping one of those guys. He's a little bit more polished than Armand Membu. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how much do the 49ers like Kelvin Banks Jr.? And if they, he does, where exactly do the tackles go? And if they go ahead of number 11, is there any chance that the 49ers trade up? I don't think that it's a very high chance. I think they'd rather trade down. I think they've already broadcast their desire to do so. But again, that's not going to be easy because a lot of teams want to trade down due to the meatiness in the middle of this draft. The most popular picks right now, and Nick just commented this right now, Walter Nolan has been listed as one of the 49ers' potential picks. That's the defensive tackle at Ole Miss. Mikael Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia, and Kelvin Banks Jr., the offensive tackle out of Texas. A couple weeks ago, I put out my mock draft. I had Derek Harmon as the 49ers' number 11 pick, the defensive tackle out of Oregon. Since then, we've learned that there's been a medical flag put up from some teams. I don't know if the 49ers are one of them, but some teams have expressed concerns about Derek Harmon's shoulder. That leads me to believe that the chances of the 49ers picking Derek Harmon are lower. But there are a lot of defensive tackles in this draft class. That is the depth of this class, at least according to the evaluators entering this draft. We cite the number a lot. 40-plus defensive tackles were invited to the NFL Combine. Only 20-something in 2024. It is a position of need for the 49ers. There is an argument that if you're going by the supply and demand of this particular draft, that you should wait on defensive tackle early on because there's so many of them, and maybe pick number 43, possibly with a trade up a few spots, can net you a guy that you really like. That goes back to the positional value argument, right? Because if you think that edge rusher and offensive tackle are such premium spots that you won't be able to get a player who truly makes you better outside of the first round, well, then you better double down on those positions early on in the draft. So it's going to be fascinating tonight because every single move ahead of the 49ers in the top 10 of the draft is going to be one that impacts what San Francisco might potentially do at number 11. So it's a domino effect kind of thing. You have to be ready for the curveballs. One of the curveballs that a draft analyst put up this morning, I forgot who it was. I think it was Albert Breer. Albert Breer said a potential 49ers curveball. First, he mocked Walter Nolan to San Francisco. So that's a Jalen Carter type of defensive tackle, played in the SEC, Ole Miss. I think Nolan is really good against the run. He had over 10 sacks last year. I don't think that pick would be particularly controversial. I think it actually might be the pick that most people are projecting to the 49ers. But the curveball that Albert Breer tossed out there was Tetairoa McMillan to the 49ers. And that would be something that corroborates what John Lynch was talking about the other day, saying, we might draft with positional need in mind, rounds 2 through 7 with those 10 picks. But in round 1, if they think that Tetairoa McMillan's the best player out there, the 49ers could go for him. That being said, I've said this from the start of the process. I don't really think Tetairoa McMillan is a Kyle Shanahan type of receiver. I don't think that he's the best route runner in this draft. I think that he's a beast. This guy's a monster. He's a tall receiver, gets up and is able to catch those jump balls and is just imposing one-on-one. But Kyle Shanahan is not the type of coach who's going to be calling a lot of fade passes. He's going to be relying a little bit more on separation. The route running is so important to him. So I just don't see it. That would be a true shocker to me. That was Albert Breer's curveball when he was discussing this NFL draft. There are going to be curveballs. We know that for sure. It's just the nature of the draft. You don't know who's going to shock you at what position, but at some point, something is going to happen that is going to alter a lot of teams' plans, which is why I think it's so silly to try to project this 15 different times ahead of time, because all 15 of those projections are going to be incorrect. So today we finally get the finalized version of what happens in this first round. Whoever you think the 49ers should pick, you can drop that name in the comment section. And if you drop that name in the comment section and I happen to see it because I'm outside right now, the wind is coming in cold off the Golden Gate Bridge. I can't say the wind is coming in hot off the Golden Gate Bridge, but wherever you put that name in there and I can see it, then I'll talk about that prospect. Keeping the Faith says Nolan or nothing. So he's very big on Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. Nolan and Mason Graham have very similar measurables. That's a potential thorn in this draft, by the way. And it's a potential curveball. We could call it a slider in this draft. What if Mason Graham drops down to number 11? Thomas Hancock says that, hoping that Mason Graham drops to the 49ers. That was the big curveball that I talked about yesterday. There's been some talk that this could happen, that Mason Graham could slip down to number 11. And I'll tell you what, if Jackson Dart, the quarterback, does go at number 9 to the Saints, and the odds of that are increasing, well, that does increase the odds of Mason Graham falling to number 11 for the 49ers. And do the 49ers like Mason Graham enough to pull the trigger on him if that becomes the case? I mean, his highlight tape was awesome at Michigan. So these are all the possibilities that are very, very intriguing right now. That's what makes this draft day so exciting. If you're nervous, give me a thumbs up in the comment section. If you want to talk about specific players, name the player, and we'll go there. Liam says, no way the 49ers take a cornerback in round 1. I tend to think the same thing. I know that Will Johnson projection has been popular for some of the national analysts. The 49ers have never taken a cornerback in round 1 under this current regime. The highest they've ever taken a cornerback was Renardo Green last year at number 61. So that was toward the end of the second round. And they've taken a lot of corners. They've used a lot of draft capital on cornerbacks, especially just in terms of sheer volume. But again, they didn't spend a pick higher than a third-round pick on a cornerback until last year, and it was a low second-round pick. Mike says the only corner the 49ers take is if Hunter falls, Travis Hunter out of Colorado, and that's not happening. Yeah, I don't think that's something that's really realistic to expect. Liam says he would love if Tyler Warren dropped somehow. You know, that, especially if you think about best player available in the first round, imagine Tyler Warren and George Kittle on this offense. You know, yesterday I was talking about George Kittle and the tremendously positive impact that he brings to the 49ers offense. The national media trying to make that situation more dramatic than it actually is. They're obviously going to extend Kittle this offseason. They want him on the 10-year wall. He's still in his prime. The adaptability that he gives the 49ers, because he is a threat to block at an elite level and catch at an elite level at a discount, right? Even if you pay George $20 million a year, that's still half of what Jamar Chase is making in Cincinnati at over $40 million a year. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. The 49ers are going to extend Kittle. What if they paired Kittle with Tyler Warren? You could kick and scream all you want about offensive line and defensive line, but if Tyler Warren, who I saw in that college football playoff and throughout this entire past season with Penn State, wearing the number 44, just dominating at 260 pounds, he's 10 pounds heavier than Kittle. If the 49ers can get their hands on him, it's going to be hard to stop them from pulling the trigger on that draft pick. And if you think about a second pass-catching tight end on top of George Kittle and the efficiency that the 49ers have been able to glean out of just one of these guys who's a really good receiver, I mean, you enter scary territory for the offense. You cannot discount the possibility of such a pick for the 49ers. And I think if it did happen, if somehow Tyler Warren did fall to number 11, a lot of people would immediately try to say, oh, well, this means they're going to trade George Kittle. And I would say, no, that's not the case. It just means the 49ers are stacking talent at a position where they've developed a huge comparative advantage versus the rest of the league. I mean, last year they drafted Ricky Pearsall, and everybody thought, oh, well, this must mean that Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel are going to be out the door right away. No, they kept Ayuk, they kept Samuel, they kept obviously kept Ricky Pearsall because they drafted him. They even kept Jawan Jennings for the next year. They stacked at wide receiver, and they still didn't have enough players at wide receiver last year, which leaves receiver in play during this NFL draft. So you cannot rule anything out. The second that you rule things out prematurely is when the poor takes are going to start rolling in when the draft actually happens, because people get into a singular lane. They get tunnel vision on what they think should happen in the most unpredictable event in sports, and then they complain and they think that a team is doing something wrong when their tunnel vision is not realized. So that's why I think it's really important to enter the draft with an open mind, because that's the way that we're going to be able to most accurately analyze it moving forward. We are at Fort Point. That is the Golden Gate Bridge, the most photographed bridge in the world. I'm sure that you recognized it. I made sure that I tilted the camera up so you could see the very top of the bridge. They are in a constant battle to repaint the Golden Gate Bridge because oftentimes the weather out here is a little blustery, as it is today. And when that wind is coming in off the Golden Gate and that fog is coming in off the Golden Gate, that iconic Golden Gate Bridge orange color, that paint starts to fray. All that moisture in the air, it's brutal out here. The conditions are not all too pleasant. So they're constantly moving back and forth across the bridge. It's a scary job. They're walking up on those cables and they're repainting that thing. And they have to climb up the side of the tower to repaint it. Once they're done repainting the whole bridge, they have to turn around and start again. It's a lot like the drafting process for teams. Even if you hit on a 2025 draft and things look great with your roster, by 2026, you're going to have to start repainting the roster and retooling the roster because stuff doesn't last long in this league. It is a physical league where youth, speed, and health are king. And the 49ers got too old last year. The average age of the team was over 29 years old, so the paint was starting to chip on the Golden Gate Bridge. 49ers now have to get on that harness and climb the tower. It's going to be harrowing, dangerous work, but they have to make sure that the fresh coat of paint is applied. And it's not as much about spots 1 through 10 on the roster. The 49ers are set with their superstars. They've got a nice superstar core. At least they're set for 2025. Obviously, they would like to be set for years beyond that, so you're going to have players blossom into stars as well. But for their 2025 needs, it's about spots 10 to 53. And they weren't young enough, fast enough, or healthy enough for spots 10 to 53 in 2025. 2022, 2023, 2024, good stuff for San Francisco, right? I mean, for 2024 wasn't good stuff. I'm a year behind. I'm speaking a year off. 2021, 2022, 2023 were good for the 49ers. 2024 was where the slippage happened for the 49ers when it came to the meaty depth of the roster. And it made sense. They had played 60 games in 3 years. They were worn down from the runs to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game. The roster was getting older every single season, and they finally hit a wall. But it underscored the importance of the youth infusion. And the youth infusion at the NFL level has to come through the NFL draft. You can get some of it through free agency. You can get some of it through undrafted free agency. But the vast majority of it has to come via the draft because the salary cap. The players whom the 49ers pick today will all be pre-slotted in at very specific contract numbers. The collective bargaining agreement that the players union and the league signed in 2020, and this is the second CBA that's like this, has what is called the rookie wage scale. So the first pick of the first round gets paid the most. The second pick gets paid a little bit less. The third pick gets paid a little bit less than that, so on and so forth. All the way down to pick number 262. I think there's not exactly 262 this year, but that's where Brock Purdy was, pick number 262. He was literally the cheapest player in the 2022 draft. Came out to like $974,000 a year in base salary for Brock Purdy. So you know exactly how much these players are going to make for the next few years. And that is a tremendous benefit to a team trying to fit under the salary cap. That's why it's so important to hit on this draft. And it, again, not just financial, this is also where you have the direct access to the youngest players. And the youngest players are going to be the hungriest players, the fastest players, the healthiest players in general in this NFL. And the 49ers need more speed, they need more hunger, they need more youth. They can get that here through the NFL draft on a cost-controlled basis. You know, a couple of the stats that are so alarming for the 49ers that have to be addressed this offseason. And one is the fact that they were dead last in average separation last year. That told me they didn't have enough speed on this football team. Now, one of the reasons they were dead last in separation wasn't just because they weren't fast enough, it was also because they weren't healthy enough. That health, I thought, was really correlated to age. They were also the oldest team last year. So, I mean, all those things cause you to turn and point toward the NFL draft as your biggest potential fix. The 2024 draft for the 49ers was their best in recent memory. 2021, 2022, 2023, those were sketchy seasons for the 49ers on the draft front. Yes, they did pick up some good players in those years. 2021, I always think of Deommodore Lenoir in the 5th round, Talanoa Hufanga in the 5th round, Elijah Mitchell in the 6th round. But they gave up a lot of first-round draft capital to trade up for Trey Lance. 3 first-round picks. So your first-round pick in 2021 was Trey Lance. Your first-round pick in 2022 was Trey Lance. Your first-round pick in 2023 was Trey Lance. So the 2022 and the 2023 drafts ended up being really tough sledding for the 49ers. Brock Purdy actually salvaged that effort in 2022. Imagine if they don't get Purdy at 262 in 2022. It's a complete disaster for the 49ers. So he's actually rescued this franchise in many ways. Finally, in 2024, the 49ers had a first-round pick again, and finally they hit on the majority of their draft picks. So that's where we turn this discussion to what did they do differently in 2024 versus 21, 22, 23. Because in 2024, Ricky Pearsall came aboard. That looks like it's a hit. Renardo Green came aboard. He's already a starter. That looks like it's a hit. Dominic Pooney, I think he's on his way to a Pro Bowl career. That looks like it's a hit. Malik Mustafa, best cover safety in football statistically last year. That looks like it's a hit. Isaac Guerendo, oh my. I mean, late in the year, I mean, he basically unseated Jordan Mason on this team. That looked like it's a hit. You could go up and down that 49ers 2024 draft class and you say, this looks a whole lot different than the hauls they were able to bring in 2021 through 2023. So how can the 49ers best set themselves up to repeat 2024-like success in 2025? And from talking to John Lynch, from talking to the 49ers decision makers, they leaned more heavily into R&D, research and development in 2024 than they had in the past. And here's how that mechanism worked. The 49ers reached better consensus in 2024 than they did in prior years. So in some years, I think that there was, especially on key picks, probably some disagreement between the coaching staff and the scouting department, the team brass. I think in 2024, not only did their research and development, their R&D department scout players, they self-scouted the 49ers themselves. They self-scouted the decision-making apparatus of the team to make sure that whatever they did in 2024 was happening in lockstep and in cohesion. And we saw the 49ers take players with a very, very specific intention in 2024. the players who they thought were the best available at their specific picks, who would fit into what the coaching staff needed so that everybody would be ready and happy, good to go. John Lynch spoke, I thought, very openly about this on Tuesday. He talked about the fact that the times when the 49ers have regretted their picks usually came after there was a lack of consensus in the building. Consensus, though, I think very clearly was something that was present in 2024. Now, John seemed very confident on Tuesday that the 49ers have a well-oiled machine now, that they turned a corner in terms of the way that they think about the draft. Well, guess what? This is their chance to show it tonight. I think that's why 49ers fans are excited. That's why 49ers fans are nervous. I mean, we've talked about the stakes of building this team, of adding what the 49ers need as far as youth, as far as speed, as far as hunger. Well, they have the most picks in this NFL draft of any team. This is where they need to flex their muscles. This is the spot where San Francisco has to take the process that they say that they've refined as far as drafting and apply it successfully. They did in 2024, but it's never about just one draft class. It's about stringing together draft classes. And everything that the 49ers do, whether it be in free agency, throughout the year, anything roster building wise that San Francisco tries to accomplish is actually tethered in the larger philosophy of accumulating as many draft picks as possible. So the Baltimore Ravens do this really well. The New England Patriots under Belichick, when Tom Brady was there, did this very prolifically. They tried to play the comp pick game as heavily as they could. So when you think about signing and letting players walk, there's a formula that if you follow that formula, you can actually accumulate more draft picks than the ones that are customarily awarded to you. So the 49ers have played this formula to pick up the most compensatory draft picks of the entire league over the course of the past half decade. It's something that they do extremely well. The Ravens and the New England Patriots of their dynasty years did this. Where I'm going with this is that the 49ers, throughout all of their actions, realize that the draft is the lifeblood of a roster and of an organization. And all of their actions in free agency, cutting players, signing players, letting players walk, is aimed at hoarding as many draft picks as possible. So if that is your mentality, and I think it's the right mentality to have, and I think it goes all the way back to Bill Walsh, who loved NFL draft and revolutionized a lot of the NFL draft process. But if that's your mentality, when the picks actually have to be used, when the draft actually shows up, you better pick well. Otherwise, it was all a waste of time. So today, it's put up or shut up time for the 49ers. You've hoarded the picks. You picked well last year. You've refined your formula. You've set the roster up, I think, over the course of this offseason for a ton of competition. Well, now you have to pick well to make sure that that competition is as quality as possible. James Gladstone, who is the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was with the Rams, has talked about this over the course of the offseason. People ask Gladstone why his Jacksonville team wasn't signing any defensive linemen, even though there are holes on the roster. And he said, well, this is a deep defensive line class, and I don't want to sign any veterans who are just going to stand in the way of rookies. He wants that hungry, youthful competition that he's going to be able to create through draft picks. And I think the 49ers are thinking in the same way. We talk about the Rams formula. San Francisco is following that Rams formula. Jacksonville is obviously employing the Rams formula since James Gladstone came from LA. It's a new way of thinking in the NFL. It is an extremely draft-focused way of thinking, but it makes sense. And today is the focal point of that effort for the 49ers and for other teams. So you've got to outfox your competition. There are 31 other teams trying to pick up really good cost-controlled talent, which is what makes this event so exciting, so difficult, and, well, the event itself is extremely unpredictable. All right, any questions? Let's toss them in. We can talk about that Rams formula a little bit. You know, I think that they built their defensive line, which I thought really turned a corner late last season, over essentially 2 drafts, 2023 and 2024. The Rams, and last year wasn't a particularly good defensive draft. I think this one's actually better as far as defensive depth goes. I don't think there was a defensive player picked until number 15 last year, but the Rams still managed to get a couple really good defensive tackles, or 1 defensive tackle and 1 defensive end, 2 defensive linemen out of Florida State. Every draft is different, but when you look at how the Rams have built their team and their front, when you look at how the Eagles have built their front, it has come through the event that starts tonight. Somebody's saying that he doesn't think that Nick Bosa is an elite edge. Are you kidding me? Come on, let's live in reality this morning. I drove all the way out to the Golden Gate Bridge to give you guys a draft show, and got people commenting that Nick Bosa is not an elite edge. Give me a break. He's one of the top 2 or 3 guys in the game. Have you seen the pressure numbers on Nick Bosa? I mean, we're talking hundreds, if not thousands, of pressures in his NFL career. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's in the top 2 or top 3 ever since he entered the league. I mean, the guy is massively impactful. If you don't think that Nick Bosa is elite, just go put on the tape of the game against the Seattle Seahawks in November. When Bosa was healthy, Seattle did absolutely nothing offensively. Then he hurt his oblique, and Geno Smith carved through the 49ers like a hot knife through butter. One player shouldn't make that kind of difference, but Nick Bosa does, because he is a top shelf edge rusher. He is a very, very good football player. Let's keep the comments realistic, guys. That's the only thing I ask. I mean, I'm not that cold right now, but I will say, if I'm coming all the way out to the Golden Gate Bridge to give you guys a cool little 49ers show on draft morning, let's not waste our time with Nick Bosa's average comments. Eric says that PFF rated Bosa's number 4 out of 211 edge rushers last year. I think that seems about right. Again, the impact that he had when they had Bosa's versus when they didn't was massive. Another guy that they didn't have against Seattle for the whole game, Bosa was only missing for the second half, but for the whole game, they didn't have George Kittle. The massive, massive impact that George Kittle has. I'm going to take a step back here, because I have the mic. You know, the mic actually makes this work really well. There's a railing here. Don't worry, I'm not going to fall in. But I think you get a better idea of the sheer size of the Golden Gate Bridge when I step back. No, last year, this was the swim that I got seasick on. We took a boat out that way through the Golden Gate to Point Bonita Lighthouse at sunrise, jumped overboard, and I swam back in through the Golden Gate Bridge right behind me. And they call, you see that big boat going through under the bridge there? Once it crosses under the bridge, they call that area the potato patch or the washing machine. And here's why, because that water is so violent there. I mean, it's so choppy that back in the day when boats coming in with potatoes would cross through the Golden Gate, the potatoes would get thrown overboard. So in theory, there are thousands of potatoes at the bottom of the bay here. It's called the potato patch or the washing machine. I think that's self-explanatory. Anyway, I started to get seasick on the boat ride out to Point Bonita, the lighthouse. I'm like, oh God, this is not good. Sun is just starting to rise. It was actually kind of blustery though, so you couldn't really see the sun, but it's just, you know, windy, choppy, you're seasick, you want to puke. And I was like, I hope that once I jump over into the water here with all the great white sharks, I hope that that kind of, knocks away the nausea. And so I did. I jumped overboard and I started swimming back toward the bridge. For about 10 seconds, I felt better. But once you're seasick out in this water, it's not going to leave until you get on land. So I'm swimming from the lighthouse under the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm throwing up every, 10 minutes or so as I'm swimming. I'm surprised it didn't attract any sharks. I felt so bad that I wished a shark would come and bite me in half. Like I just wanted to get out of that situation. So anyway, bad memories. Hopefully the 49ers draft goes better than my Golden Gate swim, because if it goes like the Golden Gate swim did, then I don't think you guys are going to be very happy at all. 49ers draft questions. Let's go. Walter Nolan, what do you guys think? Mikael Williams in the first round? I think as far as setting an edge goes, Mikael Williams, elite player out of the University of Georgia. I also like Walter Nolan, but he's a defensive tackle. He's in there on the inside. Both of those guys visited the 49ers. So did Shamar Stewart. There's a lot of talk about Shamar Stewart. I mean, the guy, think about a wingspan, Shamar Stewart. Mike, how long are Shamar Stewart's arms? So there's that one picture where he's like, I mean, I have pretty long arms, but Shamar Stewart's got longer arms. Mike is looking. I mean, this is a good wingspan right here. I'm going from side to side of the camera, right? You look at the physical measurables for that guy and you could see why NFL coaches would be really excited about him. 34.125 inch arms for Shamar Stewart. I got to get my arm length measured. This is the wingspan right here. So, I mean, he's got explosion, he's got arm length. I mean, you're happy if offensive tackles have arm length over 34 inches. So the problem is that the production hasn't been there. Mike says that we have to get my relative athletic score. I think it'd be better if I could swim instead of run for some of the speed metrics, because there's athleticism on land and there's athleticism on water. But Shamar Stewart's athletic score, the RAS, was like a perfect 10. That being said, he averaged only 1.5 sacks per season. But if Chris Kasarik believes he can develop him, and another thing is, like, it's not just developing a guy though, it's how quickly can you develop him? Because when I talk about the contracts in this NFL draft, you get a 4-year deal, 5th-year option with the first-round picks. You need the player to reach at least the majority of his potential within a couple years. Otherwise, you're missing out on the benefit of drafting him, right? You're getting him for cheap for 4 years. You don't want him to turn the corner in year 5 or year 6 because that's probably going to be for another team. So it's not just about, okay, let's develop Shamar Stewart. Let's make sure the production starts coming. It's about how quickly can we develop Shamar Stewart. 49ers are definitely going to have to ask themselves that question if they're thinking about drafting him. Again, Lynch said a little bit of everything the other day. A lot of people saw what he said about the danger of drafting players who lack production, and they said, oh, that means that they're not going to draft Shamar Stewart. But then he also said, well, but sometimes you think they can produce in your scheme because they didn't produce in their scheme in college, and that would indicate that maybe Shamar Stewart is on the table. I think that the most insightful part of Lynch's press conference, as it specifically related to what the 49ers are looking for, is when he listed the traits that they are looking for at the edge rusher position. And he started with edge setting against the run. It's getting windy here. Hopefully this tripod holds up. Edge setting against the run is seemed to be at the top of John Lynch's list. And I think that somebody like Mikael Williams is the best at that as far as edge rushers go in the reasonable pool of picks that the 49ers are going to have for that edge rushing position. So I look at him and, you know, I've said this many times over the course of the past week. It's not fair to put Mikael Williams in the same boat as Shamar Stewart. He was actually productive in college. He wasn't ultra productive, but 5 sacks a year is better than 4.5 sacks in 3 years. Somebody's saying, I can't listen to draft talk anymore, but I will watch the draft. Great. That's why I have the Golden Gate Bridge here for you guys. That's why I talk about throwing up in the bay, so we can talk about some other stuff, so we can diversify our conversation. What are my thoughts on Omar Norman-Lott? I like Omar Norman-Lott. He's a very versatile defensive lineman from Tennessee. I think the 49ers like him. I I did a video on him. I don't think I have him in my mock draft. There's 11 picks, so it's hard to remember all these projections. But I think that Omar Norman-Lott is a guy who can play multiple techniques along the defensive line, and I think that's a really, really valuable skill set to have. All right, guys, I want some more good questions. The wind is about to blow the camera over. Thankfully, we have a good microphone. Appreciate you, Michael. Am I streaming the draft? Or you mean, am I streaming during the draft? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be going live a ton. I'm going to be reacting to every pick. Hit the subscribe button right now. Hit the like button right now. Hit the little alarm bell when you subscribe, just to know every single time a video comes out, because it's going to be a very, very busy 3 days. Any chance the 49ers select Jalen Walker if he's available? Jalen Walker, to me, one of the more intriguing players in this draft, because you know, there's comparison to Micah Parsons. He's playing a bunch of different positions. He could play that move linebacker spot. He can also be an edge rusher. I think he's going to be gone before number 11. So I don't know if it's going to be something that is even possible to the 49ers. It would be a question of how much has Robert Saleh evolved since he was first with the 49ers. Because Robert, back in 2020, I don't think would have been interested in a player like that. Now, but if he thinks that he needs a joker, Swiss Army knife type of player in the front seven, and he is really intrigued by that, and we know that Robert has evolved over his time with the Jets. Kyle Shanahan has talked about that. John Lynch has talked about that. I asked John about that the other day, but if he's evolved into the mold of defensive coordinator who really, really covets that, then yes, I would think that Jalen Walker could be more of a possibility for the 49ers. Somebody asking about Tyler Warren. I appreciate your question, KC. Rewind the video. I answered about Tyler Warren a little bit earlier. I answered your exact question, but I get it. People tuning in a little bit later since this is a live. Any predictions of where the local Stanford and Cal guys end up? Well, Alec Iomanner, I actually put him in my mock draft to the 49ers. So third round pick there. I know John really likes Alec Iomanner. What do you want? Teddy Buchanan, linebacker? He could go to the 49ers too. They need a linebacker. So I think that Kane Medrano out of UCLA is who the 49ers really want. Really, really fast linebacker, fastest 40 time in this entire NFL draft at that linebacker position. So I think that they're looking for speed at that linebacker position that they can corral developmentally. Kane misses a lot of tackles, but I think they develop linebackers better than anybody. Then there's Nick Nash, receiver out of San Jose State. Nick Nash is interesting because he's going to be a later round draft pick. There's still a lot of meat on the bone there. I think there is with Iomanner too. Nick Nash played quarterback up until a couple years ago, and then he won the Triple Crown as a receiver. And a lot of teams, maybe even the 49ers, think that there's still a lot of developmental runway for somebody like Nick Nash. So who's nervous? If you're nervous, give me the thumbs up. Draft is coming up in what? I'm guessing it's about 10 o'clock now. Draft is coming up in about 7 hours. I've got to get down to Santa Clara soon. I will be at the stadium tonight. I will be talking to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan tonight. A tremendously important day for the 49ers as they build this football team. Here's a question. Where's the better seat at Oracle Park, upper or lower deck? This is the Giants ballpark. I will tell you that I think that the lower deck seats in baseball have been devalued by the big net. All I can see is the net in front of me now because it surrounds the whole field. So I don't like to sit in the very lower deck. Now, if it's your first time at the ballpark and it isn't a huge game and it's a day game especially, I would recommend going to the upper deck, down the right field line, and getting the beautiful view. Down the right field line, you get the beautiful view of the water and of the downtown skyline. If it's a bigger game and you really want to watch the game, you want some of the better seats, I would actually recommend the club level, which is going to be the second deck. There are 3 decks, the second one, because you're high enough to not have the net obstructing your view. And but you're not too high as to where, you know, the game's gonna be a little bit further away. But if you're just there to see the ballpark, go to the upper deck right field line. I would stay out of the lower level no matter what. All right, we're gonna run this rotation. Take a look at the Golden Gate Bridge. Walter Nolan to the 49ers. Seems to be a popular pick. There's Alcatraz. How about a lockdown cornerback at a part of this draft? That'd be cool too. See you guys in